Welcome to the Rest is Politics Question Time with me, Alastair Campbell.
And with me, Rory Stewart.
Now, Rory, we had a very, very, very foreign policy related main episode. Let's start with a question very much about the UK. This is from Lily. What are your thoughts on the John Smith Centre's youth poll? It's being pointed to as proof that we shouldn't believe this doom and gloom narrative around young people, but I think there are still some pretty concerning findings. So the John Smith Centre, set up in honour of John Smith, who was the Labour leader, one ahead of Tony Blair, whose death led to Tony Blair becoming leader and sort of life-changing for me and many, many other people. And the John Smith Centre does a lot of fantastic work, really trying to sort of boost political engagement, political involvement, political education. And they've done a survey. Interestingly, maybe this is because we do feel so negative. I did see it in a very, very positive light. I don't know what you thought, Rory.
Well, I was talking to Theresa May about it recently, and what struck her, of course, is that although there are some positive findings, it's still very striking that I think, is it something like 27% of young people say that they would prefer to live in a dictatorship than a democracy?
Yeah.
Now, I don't know whether this is a kind of constant theme, but that is interesting because, of course, a lot of the support for the far right in Germany comes from young people. Be interested to see the gender split on that. You know, I'd like to know how many of those are young men, because the normal story that we see repeated is that young men are getting more and more right-wing and young women are getting more and more left-wing.
I guess the other thing would be the way you frame questions. This is why surveys and polls, you have to be a bit careful sometimes. That might be an answer to a question about whether you think democracy is working very well, or whether you. If you're given a black and white, you can either have democracy or dictatorship, and then some. There might be people tempted to say, "Well, I don't think democracy is working very well. Let's give the other one a go." Just in general, just go through some of the findings. The ones that gave me a bit of hope. Only 20% said they were pessimistic about the future for themselves, their own lives. 63% optimistic. 63% say their lives will eventually be better than their parents. Only 14% say it'll be the worst. Now, economically, that doesn't look like it's the case. So it's interesting that they have taken that on for their own lives. 72% describe themselves as rather happy or very happy. 28% say not very happy or not at all happy. But this is where maybe the Lily's question about the concerns. 56% say they feel anxious either daily or weekly. And as you say, 27% would actually be happy to live in a dictatorship. And 63% think that British democracy is, quote, in trouble. So, you know, there is, I took the hopeful bits out of it, but I can see why Lily might look at the more pessimistic outcome.
James Johnson, who is a pollster that we used a lot in the run-up to the UK election, and it's been doing a lot in the US at the moment, has done some polls in Grimsby recently, focus groups in Grimsby recently. And he got in touch with me to say that he was really thrown off balance because he's been used to, last couple of years, doing American focus groups, which have been pretty apocalyptic and terrifying, what people say. You know, he, for example, is somebody who did predict the Trump victory in the election on the basis of those things, and usually comes to UK and finds it kind of gentler and kinder. But actually, his recent stuff in Grimsby was pretty terrifying. You know, not a single person in the focus group could point to a single positive achievement from the Labour government. Almost everyone he spoke to gave this sort of completely dystopian vision of a kind of country swamped with crime, swamped with immigration, swamped with mental health issues, long hangover of COVID, junkies, homelessness. So I don't know. I mean, and what's your instinct, actually? I mean, if we step aside from the sort of contradictory things of John Smith sounding positive and James Johnson sounding negative, how do you sort of feel your way towards this? I guess if you were still in office, you'd be doing focus groups yourself, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Look, there's no doubt there is generally about politics right now and about the state of the country quite a negative mood. That's why I did take some hope from, and I've said to you before, every time I go into schools, I always feel that the younger generation has actually got a better outlook on some of these things than we often give them credit for. But it is a generation dealing with a whole succession of very, very big challenges. And when you ask them, the John Smith Centre asked them about what they saw as their main contributors to anxiety, Number 1 was financial worries. Number 2 was work pressure. Number 3 was job insecurity or unemployment. What would make them happier? The most popular answer was higher wages and financial stability. Affordable housing, massive problem. State of the health service, massive problem. So, and then the other thing about politics, and again, this may be as me again looking for something that I believe in and therefore want to believe is true, but they do say that they really want politicians to be more open with them, to be more honest. They want more young people in leadership roles. And they see politics as not functioning very well, and in part because of the terrible division within politics. So it's a mixed bag. I think Lily's right. I read it with a very optimistic lens, but I think that she may be right. A couple of other issues that were interesting. 67% think that social media for under 16s should be banned. 28% disagree. 67% say toxic masculinity is becoming more common, against 21% who don't think that it is. And when we talked about adolescence last week, we had a huge response to that discussion. But I think one of the things that we maybe didn't focus on enough, given the context of the film, was this issue of violence, misogyny, violence against women and girls, which of course was at the heart of that story. But the toxic masculinity, again, maybe the sort of kids that come and see me when I go to schools, I always come away with a sense that a lot of the young boys and young men in schools and colleges, they get that it's a problem. They're the ones who kind of often bring it to the fore. But I guess maybe the ones who would think there's nothing wrong with going around saying that, women are inferior, or women have taken all the rights, or women are now, running the world, which on an objective level is such nonsense, but it's sort of part of that misogynistic language. Maybe they're not the ones who come and hear me talk. I don't know.